Welcome back, Officers Republics, your Coruscant Honorable Police Chief APGAINS. For another episode of APGAINS during his lunch break. It's just APGAINS, but I'm hungry, and instead of eating, I'm talking to you guys. So I had a question pop up on Patreon yesterday, which is an interesting question, one that I talk about plenty of times on stream, but I thought I'd cover it here really quickly. And that's how I decide not only which characters to relic, but also what relic level to take each of those characters to. And this is a very, very important decision for all of you guys, regardless of level. Now, obviously, if you're absolutely dumping cash money into the game, you can do whatever you want. But this is going to be geared more towards people who aren't spending money on the game, or at the very least, aren't spending a ton of money. Like maybe you got yourself a hyperdrive, or maybe like a couple of guys today, the executor's out, and man, I'll spend $20 to get a 7-star executor, a month or two early, right? If you fall into these categories, this is kind of who I'm talking to at this point. So obviously, as you progress through the game, a lot of relics are going to be chosen for you, right? A lot of them are requirements, like if you want to get Kenobi, you got a relic GK to 8, right? If you want to get Luke, you got a relic the other Luke to 7, right? Some relics are just going to be decided because they're requirements, and that's totally fine. I have absolutely no problem with filling out a relic requirement for a character if that character is worth it, right? Like, if you're gonna grab Jabba, I'll have you relic a Morian Guard. We get into some conversations about C and if C is worth it or not. I won't get into those, but totally fine. Now let's talk about the first step. Characters that we are actually going to take past Gear 12 in Relic. Generally speaking, I would say that this is going to scale with your GP level, right? So if you're 6 million, you're going to need a lot of really high relic characters, not only for Datacrons, but just competing against those 8, 9 million GP players you're going to place in GAC. But even for 1 and 2 million GP, and we're scaling up, as we scale up, we're going to need to eventually apply more gear and eventually apply more relics just to stay competitive with other people, right? And that's totally fine. When I want to apply a relic to a character, the first thing I look at is like the squad tab, right? Let's look at my GAC squads. And I'll just scroll to like some less geared teams to make it look like I'm apparently I got rid of all my less geared teams on my GAC window for some reason. But let's say this team right here, double penetration. Let's imagine they're all gear 12 except for Vader, who's relic because he should always be your first relic, regardless of what you're farming, regardless of what you're doing. Let's take into consideration here. Which character would I relic first? Or how would I decide which, if any of these characters, I would relic? Now, of course, some people might immediately say EP is a requirement for a Galactic Legend, and Thrawn is good for a ship, and Mara Jade is a requirement for Starkiller, so we'd probably start somewhere there. Now, realistically, what you're going to want to do is kind of a test that I put characters into when I'm deciding to relic them or not. And it's simple as if I take this character, this relic, and this applies for deciding which relic to get to, like if you want to go 3, 5, 7, 9, whatever, is this character's like viability transformed by applying the relic? Now let's start with Vader. Now obviously Vader with Merciless Massacre at Gear 12 does some great stuff. But is he transformed by relicking? I would say yes. You can solo more teams. When you plug him into teams, he does more damage. You have more viability. You can beat more teams with a relic Vader than you can with a Gear 12 Vader. Right? You might be saying APGAINS, every character can beat more if it's relic. Well, I mean fundamentally different. I'm not talking about can you beat up more Gear 10 squads more efficiently if they were relics. I mean, like, does it unlock a brand new counter that because of synergies, because of kits, wouldn't exist without the extra stats and extra damage of relics? For Vader, the answer is yes. Now, if we're going to go to what relic we should take him to, does Vader's viability scale with his relic levels? Well, his relic levels scale how much damage he can do in quick bursts, and how much he can do in quick bursts is kind of the whole point of a Vader solo. So I would say if you're using Vader for the sole purposes of soloing teams, I would argue yes, he does scale. Now, if we go to EP, does EP get fundamentally better when he's relicked? I would argue not necessarily. Now, he is relic gear 12, and this is just because I had the spare gear and I slapped it on him, and I needed an extra relic Sith character for my for my Malgus team, so I get that Malgus synergy working. But I haven't really used this team ever since. So I'd say fundamentally EP doesn't unlock new counters. It's just simply by having those extra stats. Where EP really shines is his kit and his synergy, and that plays off of other people. And so the relic isn't that important. And let's say that we did relic him. Does he pass the second smell test where he gets better as we scale him with relics? I would say no. The highest outside of him being a requirement for Galactic Legend, obviously the highest I would ever take him is probably where he is, or Relic 1, or maybe Relic 3 for a Datacron if one arises at some point. And, well, I guess at some point it's probably going to be Relic 5 for, a Star Tiller Datacron, but that's a totally different conversation. Let's go to Moff Gideon. Moff Gideon, kind of the same thing. Does he get fundamentally, game-changingly better at Relics? No. I'm going to leave him at Gear 12. Mara Jade. Obviously, she's a requirement, but if we pretend like that's not happening and she's just a normal character, does she get fundamentally better if she's Relicked? I would say possibly. I would say that possibly her and EP kind of fit into the same category of extra potency, extra speed, extra protection, blah, 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 blah. They work really well together. If we're going to Relic EP, we're going to probably Relic Mara Jade. If we're going to Relic Mara Jade, maybe we consider Relicing EP just because of how those kits play together. Now, this obviously is one team, but this could be any team. Like, this could be literally... My game froze. That's so awesome. Did my entire computer freeze, or is just my game? Okay, apparently my game froze and I had no idea. So, quick intermission while we load this up, but I'll continue my point here. I don't even remember what my point was. Oh, yes, of course. If the character, of course, gets fundamentally better with the Relic, and it could be any team. I was going to show a random team and we were going to talk about. Let's just imagine it's like Django, New Gunray, Separatists with Django and Droideka or whatever, right? Do they fundamentally unlock new counters as they get relics? That's kind of one of those gray areas. Arguably, because that's a really festering team, arguably they do get better. The game just had a reset. If you guys are wondering why the game crashed, there's a scheduled reset that happened from CG. I'm sure they just added a new character or something into the game. Let's go back to the squad tab here. Let's just take a random team. The Bounty Hunters for some reason. What was saying, does the team get fundamentally better if she's Relicked? No. She's a synergy character and her Relic doesn't really matter. Boss, does the team get fundamentally better if he's Relicked? I would argue yes, because he tanks this entire team. Is his viability and counters scalable with Relics? I would say yes, because he's going to be able to withstand more damage, which is his job in this role. Okay, he passes both tests, we can high Relic him. Grief Karga, does he fundamentally get better because of Relics? I would say maybe, and that's why I have him at Relic 3, because he needs to survive long enough to help call in assists and to get the retribution, the cleanse, and all that stuff, and he's an integral part of this member. So maybe if we're going to scale this up to counter a gas or to cat snipe a JMK team or whatever, he would scale with Relics, but realistically for this team he can probably stay lower Relics. Zam Wessel, more than other characters, scales very well because of her Omicron passing along stats. So is she a good option for a higher Relic on this team? I would argue yes. Am I going to do it? No, because I kind of have this tuned in to snipe those Malgus, Darth Revan teams, snipe those gas teams. Not quite there for sniping JMK Cat, but for what I need this team to do, it's scaled well for my GP level. And then Mando, same thing as Grief. Does he get slightly better with Relics? I would argue yes, because he needs to survive to annihilate. Does he scale super high with Relics? I would argue that it's not necessarily important. Another example, this team. How much of this team scales with Relics? I would argue maybe only Piet and Dark Trooper are worth relicking here if you're going to get maximum viability. Even at 6 million GP, I do great stuff with here. Does Dark Trooper scale with Relics? I would argue yes, because he gets more offense and can punch more stuff, right? So that's kind of the test that I apply to different teams to see not only when I should relic a character or when it's even reasonable to relic a character, but then I add that extra layer to figure out what's the appropriate relic level for that character. Now, obviously, as you scale with GP, that those different levels of relics are going to change. If you're 1 million GP, Relic 3 is pretty strong. If you're 7 million GP, you're probably not going to get a lot out of anything under Relic 5 because you're cranking out Datacrons and all your opponents are full R7 teams, and you're going to be in a sticky situation. So some stuff to keep in mind. I got to get back to work. I actually have a meeting in 30 minutes I got to prepare for. So as always, I love you, and I will see you later.